7th grade lesson 10.2 is generating random samples. And we usually use tools for this because our brains are really good at finding patterns and using those even when we don't mean to. Like teachers, for example. A lot of times you'll see they have some random way of calling on kids in the classroom because our brains kind of target certain areas of the room. And if we just relied on trying to stay random by our brain, it wouldn't be as random as it should. So sometimes you'll see teachers with a name of every student on a stick that they put in a can so that they can make sure that things stay random, or apps that keep things random that will pull a name. And so that's kind of the same situation as this lesson is. It's just different ways you can get a random sample to make sure your brain isn't finding patterns in it. So the first way they talk about is using technology, and they specifically say using a graphing calculator, but the situation with the graphing calculator is maybe you don't have one. And it talks about how you can set up the graphing calculator. If you have one, you would type in, they tell you could click the math button, depending on the calculator too. As you know, calculators vary depending on who made it. But if you click the math button and you scroll to the right and select PRB, and then you would select rand int, then it wants you to plug in what your range is. Like, let's say for that example they give in the book, you're looking for any numbers 1 to 200, so you would put in that range. And that would give you the range of numbers that they can choose from. So you will have assigned 200 numbers to something, and then you want it to choose random picks. So if you're choosing 20, then it's going to ask you, right, how many do you want to choose? You would say 20 out of the sample, and that would give you 20 random numbers. That would be on a graphing calculator. On one website I use for because I don't have a graphing calculator handy to do that, but I always have my computer handy. So a website I use for that is called randomizer.org. It is free. And you go into it, you say, I want to do random samples. You type in the range. It walks you through everything you need to do for that. And then it will spit out random numbers at you from the number range that you gave it. So that's one way that you can get random samples chosen. And you'll see me use that in one of the examples, or you'll see how I got the numbers in one of the examples. There's all kinds of randomizing apps out there that you can locate, and for a variety of different things that you need to get a sample for. So that's what that first page is talking about, is you can use a graphing calculator, and I'm just going to add to that, you can use an app if you need to, or a website if you need to get random numbers so that your brain isn't finding the patterns. Other randomizing things you can use is you can put everybody's name in a hat, or sticks in a can, like the names of the students on a stick, to randomize things, put it in a can. You can roll a dice depending on how many things you have. And in this case, that's what I think this one suggests, where it says you have a 10-sided dice. You number these rows by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you roll that dice for this row and then this row. Let me walk you through this sample, and then we'll talk about that. But it's all about how can I make things random to make sure they're random. So roll a dice, put names in a hat, put names on a stick, use a randomizing app, use a graphing calculator. Those are all ways you can get things to be random. So we have a tree farm that has a 100-acre square field arranged in a 10 by 10 array. 10 by 10. The farmer wants to know the average number of trees per acre. Each cell in the table represents an acre. The number in each cell represents the number of trees on that acre. So the farmer decides he wants to find out on average how many trees he has in the whole place, or on each acre, I guess. How many trees he has per acre, right? And so he could add all of these up, all 100 of these, and divide by 100. He could do that, but who has time for that, right? This farmer's busy. He doesn't have time for that. So he decides to take a sample. He's going to take 10 plots, 10 of the acres, randomly. Now, see, it's important to be random in this case because maybe one area has better soil than another area. So if he just said, I'm just going to take the first 10 and do that, well, what if these don't have, and you can even see, if you look at those numbers, the average of those would be different from the average of these. There's a soil difference over the land. So he wants an average of the whole thing. So he's going to pick randomly from the whole amount, the whole sample. I mean, the whole size. And his random choices will be sample. Now, he's going to roll a dice, a 10-sided dice. Whatever it lands on here marks the acre on this column, and then roll it again for which row it is, and then go ahead and just mark, okay, it's going to be this one. I didn't have a 10-sided die, so I used that randomizing app, and I asked for 10 numbers from the out of 10. I asked for it to give me random 10 numbers of 1 through 10, and then I asked it to do it again for the 1 through 10, and these are the numbers I got. Okay, this was the first 10 random numbers. This was the second 10 random numbers. This will be my row for the first 10. This will be my row for the second 10. And then I'm just going to go ahead and use a highlighter and highlight those spots. So let's go column 4, row 8 would be here. Column 1, row 8 would be here. Column 5, row 10. Column 1, row 6. Column 9, row 4. Column 10, row 2. Column 5, row 4. Column 4, row 5. Column 5, row 1. And column 1, row 9. Then I would take each of these numbers and find the mean or the average of all of them. And when I add each of these numbers together, I got 503. Then I will divide by how many there were. There's 10 numbers there. So I'm going to get 50.3. 503 divided by 10 is going to be 50.3. So I get an average on my sample of 50.3. Now they say, hey, now compare that to the actual. Somebody went through, poured them, and added all 100 of these and divided by 100 to get the actual mean of the whole thing. And it was 48.4. So how does my average compare to that? It's very close, right? Very close to actual. Okay, and then it says compare it to your classmates' ones. Now, if they did it random, they're probably going to get a similar answer, something very close to the actual average. If they did just this row, you can look at this and see, you're going to get an average somewhere in the mid-20s, high 20s on this row. That's going to be very far from average. So that's the whole point of this lesson, is making sure you understand. Use something to help you make it random for sure. So that's what the lesson is about, whether it's dice, whether it's an app, whether it's the graphing calculator, or names in a hat, something like that. Use something to make it random so that you can get the most accurate numbers in your sample, so that your brain's not just choosing one, it doesn't end up skewed. So if you can keep it random, then in some way, then you're going to get a fairly accurate view of what the average would be. That's all this lesson is. Make it random.